Welcome back to another episode of Swarzo History. In this one, we're going to be talking about the second song off of my latest album, Born to Rule, and the name of that song is Guns of Castillon. In the last episode, we talked about the lead up to this, mostly about Henry VI and his difficult position. As we know, the English and the French had been at war for a very long time, and this war had been termed the Hundred Years' War, and the Battle of Castillon is generally regarded as the last decisive battle of that war. Back in 1420, there was a treaty agreed on between the English and the French, where Henry V was going to inherit the French throne when Charles VI died. And to complicate everything, the two guys ended up dying relatively close in time to each other. So Henry VI inherited that inheritance and was thus considered both the King of England and France. Meanwhile, Charles VI, the French king, his son, Charles VII, thought he should be French king. So that kind of reignited this war, and it led to the English losing a lot of ground in France. In 1451, the French captured Bordeaux, which was a very important fortress city in France, and the English really only had control of the Calais garrison at that point. This is what triggered that invasion of France that I mentioned in the last video. So in 1452, Henry VI, or at least his government, planned this invasion force led by the Earl of Shrewsbury, John Talbot, and it was intended to go to Aquitaine, retake Bordeaux, and kind of start moving from there to reclaim English possessions in France. I wrote a bunch about this invasion force in my master's thesis, by the way. And things started out going very well. The English were able to take Bordeaux back, and even moved on to retake a lot of the surrounding area in Gascony. But while this stuff was happening, the French managed to lay siege to Castillon. And the Battle of Castillon was a result of the English on the ground, under the Earl of Shrewsbury, moving to relieve Castillon from that French siege. Now, the Earl of Shrewsbury was supposed to be waiting at Bordeaux for reinforcements to arrive, but the situation seemed urgent enough to him that he just went straight there. So because this was kind of rushed, the English arrived with a relatively small force, and they did win a little battle in the vicinity. Soon afterwards, they noticed a lot of dust in the sky from the French camp area, and they assumed that this meant that the French were retreating. The dust was most likely camp followers leaving. But essentially, they took it as a sign that the French were retreating, and Talbot ordered his men into a battle, and they met a French army. And that French army was very well placed and had a lot of very well placed artillery with it. So the English were outnumbered and outpositioned, outgunned, and this battle commenced anyway, and rather than calling the thing off when he realized what was going on, the English commander pressed the attack instead of waiting for his reinforcements to show up. The artillery here was super decisive, and it was said that each round from artillery took out like 6 Englishmen that were advancing. And this was just wave after wave of guys getting hit with stones. And as reinforcements were showing up, they were just getting sent in waves as well. So it was a mess. And a lot of people make the assumption that, this English commander probably just refused to admit the fact that he made a mistake and didn't want to show everyone that he was wrong. So he pressed forward with this attack as he did. And in the end, the English got routed by a French cavalry charge. Talbot, the Earl of Shrewsbury, and his son, also John Talbot, but not the Earl of Shrewsbury, they both ended up killed in this battle. This was a catastrophe, And soon after, the French were able to go right back, retake Bordeaux, and the situation essentially ended the way it began, with the English really only holding on to the Calais garrison and surrounding area. And this catastrophe was a huge trigger event for everything that happened over the next couple decades, and it really triggered all of the events that we're going to be talking about, which occurred during the rest of this album that I wrote. When Henry VI heard about this defeat, he had a mental breakdown. It was unbearable news. He was now the king that lost France and the 100 Years' War, while also being the son of the guy that was basically glorified for being the one who brought English victory in France. My song about this, The Guns of Castillon, really I wanted to focus on the soldier's perspective rather than the political implications of this. I do mention, big dreams being smashed and things like that, but mostly I wanted to focus on what it would have been like to be a part of this. We can talk all day about the political implications, which are huge, don't get me wrong, but to have been a soldier being sent in lines and waves up against these guns just because some guy didn't want to admit that he messed up is, I want to say unthinkable, but it's not. I mean, it happens over and over again throughout history and into the modern day. So if you're more interested in this topic, the fall of English France, there is a book by a guy named David Nicole, and it's a very light book. I referenced it a few times for my master's thesis, and yeah, I can recommend it. It's got some information, a lot of pictures, cool stuff. And as I'm making this video, Born to Rule, the album, has been out for just a couple days now, and I am very happy that it is finally released. I've received some private messages from some people who've already listened to it or bought it, and they're saying very nice things. I'm very happy about that. If you haven't already heard it, you can do so on whatever streaming service you use. You can also find it on the official Swarzo website. You can find it on my Bandcamp. There are still CDs available. This is mine that I stole from myself. It's got the album art on there by Maxwell Aston. Look at that CD. I think that's awesome how that came out. And a track list in there as well. Thank you for watching. Thank you for listening to the album. I will see you soon with the next video where we're going to talk about prosperity through victory.